So just a quick, I guess, summary of my ride south over, I think I crossed like 6 countries, or was in 6 countries in the last 5 days. So everything's a little bit of a blur, especially on the motorcycle. I did ride, I don't know, I didn't necessarily ride hard. I had long days, it just took long with all the border crossings. So I just wanted to do a quick update. So I left Oaxaca, drove to Tapachula, which, is kind of one of the most southern, bigger cities in Mexico, just to kind of get a good starting point for crossing into Guatemala. That was actually a really nice ride. Those first 200 kilometers, once you get out from the outskirts of Oaxaca, is just amazing. You know, lots of twisties, and you're going through the mountains, and you see all these agave fields, I guess. You know, I was able to stop, took some pictures, farmers or, locals actually, harvesting the agave plant. So that was really cool. And then as you kind of get further south, the roads, aren't as twisty, but you kind of see more greenery. You can definitely tell it's becoming more lush. So it's actually a really pretty ride. The roads, for all I remember, are pretty good. On a motorcycle though, it's like, bad roads don't really bother you that much unless it's like hardcore off-road stuff. So if you're in a camper or some other type of vehicle, don't take my word for that. But for a motorcycle, it was really, really nice driving. So crossing into Guatemala, I think we were talked about that, but my kind of just looking back now of, across all these Central American countries, Mexico obviously is not only Central American, but southern Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica now. And I think, always the big scary country was Honduras. And, that really wasn't the case it wasn't the case for me. I did drive through Honduras in one day, didn't really stop and explore anything, and not really any of these countries. I had been to Guatemala before, so didn't really, spend one night in Antigua. Didn't, spend one night in El Salvador. Drove through Honduras, spent one night in Nicaragua, and now I'm in Costa Rica. So, really didn't spend time to explore. I don't know that I'll necessarily go back with a motorcycle, maybe with a group or whatever. I didn't, never really felt in danger anywhere. Never felt, like even at the borders, like I left my motorcycle, I parked it somewhere close and obvious, but I didn't really monitor it. My helmet was there. I left my jacket on the bike. My jacket had money in it, had my GPS tracker in it, had, other papers in it. Not my passport and my wallet and my phone, but, had some valuables in it for sure. And I never really felt worried about it. Sometimes I forgot to lock the cases and, never really felt like, there was, it was dangerous, and maybe I just got lucky, but I think some of this is, might be overrated, or maybe just because the negative things that do happen, they get all the attention, which is, that's pretty typical everywhere. But anyway, I didn't have any other than like, bureaucracy and bad attitudes of border agents and all that, which is, you go into Canada, it's the same thing. I mean, I've never really had a good border crossing into Canada, so it is what it is. It's just border crossings. You can't really judge a country necessarily by a border crossing. So border crossings apart, I didn't really have a bad experience anywhere. Gas was always readily available. People were friendly. Sometimes people were too friendly, especially on the motorcycle. They'd come up, ride next to you and, start honking and this or that. And, to me, that feels like a little dangerous, especially if you're trying to avoid potholes and all that. But, people do that everywhere, so that's no big deal. So, overall, it was actually a pretty positive experience. I will say Guatemala probably has the worst driving conditions in terms of, or worst drivers, not necessarily, just worse, just very little. It's very chaotic, let's put it that way, both in a good and a bad way. And, it's chaotic, meaning on a motorcycle, you can pass left, you can pass right, double yellow lines doesn't mean anything, so it's just, you just have to have your wits about you. You can't assume, your road rules apply. You just have to, drive with your eyes open and be alert. At the same time, it's very pragmatic on the motorcycle. You can pass on the right, pass on the left, do whatever you want to get forward. So there's a little bit of a, fun factor in that. You just have to be careful, or be alert, I should say. Seems like as you keep going, Guatemala's the worst, and as you keep progressing towards the south, everything gets better, more regulated. Roads are better. It's more, stricter. El Salvador was, I guess nothing really stands out for El Salvador. The roads were, immediately better, mostly better. Honduras roads were actually pretty good. Nicaragua roads were really good. I'll caveat that with, you have really good roads, and then all of a sudden there's going to be, this looks like a newly paved road, and there's going to be like a manhole-sized pothole in there that if you hit, you could, trash your wheel presumably. So you can't just space out, obviously, in any of these countries like you could on a U.S. highway, presumably. But as you got into Nicaragua, well, let me back up. So I did get pulled over once in El Salvador. And being pulled over here, it doesn't, nobody follows you. At least that's been my experience. No cops follow you and, turn on their sirens, blah, 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 like in the US. They're just kind of standing on the roadside and wave you over. So as I was kind of pulling into San Miguel, there were a couple cops, on the side of the road there, and they saw me from far off and waved me over. And I don't know if they could probably tell, based on my bike, and the bikes on the BMW, they're always on, which is, I think that's probably legal requirement, and either way I would want it that way. But a lot of the bikes here, most of the bikes here, I'd say, don't have their lights on during the day. So, he pulled me over, and initially he was kind of standoffish, and, just like, kind of grunted at me for my papers and all that, and I just, smile and wave, right? So, I pulled over, turned the engine off, and I was, had my earplugs in. So I took my helmet off, had gloves off, helmet off, earplugs out and all that, and just looked at him and, smiled and said hi. And then, I forget exactly what happened, but I think I asked him again about what he wanted to see, or tried to, I do kind of, I tell him that I speak a little bit of Spanish, which I feel like that's just the right attitude, because, you're trying to learn their language. You're not just a complete gringo asshole. But, then when it gets, complicated, I can always, I either truly don't understand, or, I can play like I don't understand. So that's worked for me so far. And, I feel like, I'm trying to learn Spanish, that's for sure, even though I might keep playing dumb with traffic stops. Anyway, we basically just started talking, and, he was interested in the bike, wanted to know where I was from, where I was going. And then, we somehow, I explained to him, that, hey, that, the bike is from Germany, and that I had been in Germany, and that Alyssa's in Germany, and my mom's in Germany. And, so we just kind of started, he thought that was exciting. So we just started talking, and, he talked about his bike, and, he wanted to know, everybody wants to know how fast it goes, and horsepower, and how much it costs. Those are like the three questions. How fast does it go? And then, I tell them it's like 200 kilometers an hour at least. And then they're like, oh my God, which is cool. And then, horsepower, which is, whatever. And then, I give them kind of a lowered figure for what it costs. Anyway, so, it's always a nice conversation topic, it seems, for the bike. So after that long story short, after that traffic stop, he didn't, he just, wished me well, and I went on my way. I never got off the bike, and he never saw any papers. So then Honduras, there was just, a couple guard points after the border crossing, but nobody there was interested in seeing anything. They weren't stopping anybody. So Honduras, no stops. Nicaragua had, well, Honduras didn't have the official. I had read that there was like an official military stop that was a little more professional, but I didn't see that anywhere. Nicaragua had a lot of a lot of cops at the side of the road. It seems like that's just where they hang out or are stationed. It's usually a car with, 3, 4, 5 people, sometimes 2 cars. And I think they pull over. I don't think they're out to get gringos. That wasn't the impression I was getting. Like, I was riding behind another biker, and a local bike, clearly a local biker, smaller motorcycle. He had this huge bag and all that. So they pulled him over right in front of me and waved me through, right? Even though I was clearly the gringo. And then a few other places, they, I could see that they had pulled over locals. Well, sometimes they weren't pulling over anybody. They were just kind of standing on the side of the road. One time there were 2 bikers that caught up with me, local bikers. One of them was on a BMW, one of them was on, I think, some Italian, motorbike. And they were going pretty fast. So when they passed me, they were honking and waving, and the guy had like an S1000, and it was a fast bike, looked brand new, and they were clearly having fun. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna follow these guys. So I kind of, I started following them, and we were passing on double yellows and all that, obviously when it was safe. And at some point they were kind of gesticulating that, hey, there's cops ahead. And I don't know if this is the signal. This is a signal they made. I may not be familiar with that. That could be a universal signal for cops. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, there were cops ahead, and there was this pickup truck that had passed us earlier that was going like crazy fast. And they had pulled him over, and, they were checking his papers, and they had 2 people pulled over, locals. They had this other person pulled over, and he was just like yelling and screaming and gesticulating, like full on, display of, his dissatisfaction with being pulled over. So I don't know what was going on there. The police were basically just, checking his papers while he was like going, yelling and screaming. And that was just, it took me 5 seconds to pass this place. And, I was getting that from the 5 seconds that I observed. So anyway, again, long story short, the cops, there's lots of cops in Nicaragua. They pull locals, mostly locals over in my very limited experience. And the rules, I think, are a little bit more strictly enforced. I mean, again, they don't follow you, but, I kind of try to follow maybe the more faster drivers here in Nicaragua, but I never got pulled over, which actually was nice because I didn't have the local insurance. When I crossed the border, I think I mentioned that in my other video. There was nobody selling insurance, so I didn't know where to get insurance. So I'm like, okay, I didn't really have insurance anywhere else. And so I didn't have insurance. So I figured, well, if they pull me over, that could be a problem, but ended up not mattering. So then, so I guess roads get better. And then once you're in Costa Rica, it's, there's still some, again, roads are really good. Less trash that's a big thing. That's kind of too bad. Guatemala is like the worst. There's just piles of trash on the side of the road. And then as you get further south, you've seen that improving to various degrees. And then once you get to like Nicaragua, I think I saw crews cleaning up the side of the road. So that was kind of nice to see. And kind of backing up to like in Honduras, there were some really modern, they had some big solar fields out there, right? Not stuff that you would typically associate or, with my prejudiced, hey, Central American Banana Republic type setup. But, so these countries have modern, infrastructure, modern pieces of infrastructure, I should say. Nicaragua, I came by some huge wind farms there that all look, pretty modern. And then once I got into Costa Rica, I didn't see any wind farms, but the roads were just, pristine. There was hardly any garbage on the side of the road. So yeah, it's been a good experience. And I'd have to say as of right now, Costa Rica definitely seems to be the nicest place. I'm here now at this Airbnb. I have really good internet, and I'm pretty far out in the country here, ish. So yeah, very pleasantly surprised, and definitely recommend it to anybody who wants to do the trek. So long story, but hopefully for me to remember someday, and Pete might help somebody on there make a decision to come down here.